Okay, so we went over this earlier, but I wasn't fully informed about most stuff. I'm still not really super informed about everything. But at least about the tank stuff, I have a decent idea. So Blizzard posted some class tuning earlier today or yesterday, wherever you are, and there are a lot of changes to mostly the undertuned hero trees. Like, let's say your blood and your best one is Deathbringer, they buffed Sand Lane. They did that basically for most of the hero trees. So we'll start at the top. Blood, a bunch of damage buffs to Sand Lane. It is quite possible that Sand Lane will be better for damage at many different target counts, like single target AoE. I haven't done the full math, but it seems like Blood will favor Sand Lane if you only care about damage. Personally, I think defensively, Sand Lane is much, much worse than Deathbringer. So I think it's unlikely that you play Sand Lane in keys, but it may see play in raid. And low keys, obviously, for damage, because you can't die in low keys anyway. For Havoc, we've got some buffs to Eldrachi. I think most people are playing Felskard, so it'll be interesting to see if the dynamic shifts a bit, especially in raid. I think in keys, maybe it's a little bit too much to expect someone to play Eldrachi, unless it's performing crazy higher, which I don't think this will do. But in raid, I could see people playing Eldrachi a lot more often now, even though I haven't actually done any math, so I'm not sure if it's better. For Vengeance, we got a buff to our Mastery, which was good because Mastery has been terrible on Vengeance Demon Hunter for a while. I'm pretty sure it's still terrible, but at least it's not so terrible that you'll consider not wearing the 4-set. I think you'll at least wear the 4-set now. It's also like a baseline buff to Vengeance Demon Hunter because like you're getting more out of your Mastery. Like the baseline Mastery that you randomly get, like your free point or the base 15% or whatever. And whatever you have on required gear, like the tier set, potentially very rare ring and raid, etc. Let's close WoW. Okay. Also, this healing, Shattered Souls healing, increases 7% from 6 is kind of massive, I think. That's like an 18-ish percent buff to the soul healing, if I'm reading that right. Which is quite a lot. Soul healing is most of your healing. I would say that this is a bigger buff to Eldrachi than it is to Felskard because a higher proportion of your healing is souls with Eldrachi, whereas Felskard is more reliant on the frailty debuff to heal them. Also, we got a soul barrier buff. This talent has not been playable ever since it came out, so I'll be interested to see if this is enough to make it playable. It is takeable as Eldrachi with the no bomb build. You drop Burning Blood and Soul Furnace, which is probably going to be roughly like 5 to 8%. It's completely YOLO math, 5 to 8% damage loss in exchange for Soul Barrier. So if it's good enough to warrant that, then we'll see. Also possible that you can play Soul Barrier and then drop a defensive talent elsewhere, such as Soulmonger. So we'll see how good it ends up being. I think if Soul Barrier sees play, it'll definitely be with Eldrachi because I don't think Burning Blood is droppable as Felskard. So we will see next week. I expect myself and probably at least one other Demon Hunter to be playing with this. So we'll see how it goes. Feral, no idea how good or bad this is. Resto, Cenarian Ward buffed by 40 and all healing increased by 5. Obviously, it's a pretty big buff to their healing. However, Resto healing is already quite weak. The rest of the druids I talked to are saying this is not nearly enough, so we'll see how it goes. Personally, I think it'll be like at least playable now, but we'll see. Blistering Scales grants allies 20% of your armor instead of 30. This is obviously a nerf to augmentation. It's not going to do anything to make augmentation any less required. Buffing main stats to tank and healer is still way too OP compared to what every other DPS does. So if augmentation is anywhere near close to the other like specs in DPS, it's always brought in the highest keys. So it's basically just in guaranteed. This doesn't change anything, except that now in all the keys that still have augmentation evoker in them, the tanks will just have less armor. That's basically what this change does. Devastation, don't know enough. Preservation, I don't really know that much, but from what I understand, the raid build is giga nerfed, the one they've been playing. But they can just go Chrono Warden, which is quote unquote harder to play, but the same healing, which I find somewhat hard to believe, but I guess we'll see how it goes. Definitely will be at least a learning curve there in a lot of guilds raids, so we'll see how that goes. BM Hunter, from what I've read, is a 9% single target loss and a 9% AoE gain. Those numbers are completely made up by me, and I heard them somewhere else, so take them with a grain of salt. So maybe it'll be at least playable in Mythic Plus, and it'll probably not be as good in Raid. Survival, I don't really know enough, but this looks like a small buff. I don't know if it's going to make it a lot more viable or whatever, but, you know, I'm sure they'll enjoy it. Mage, I don't know anything about Frostfire, so, well, I don't know anything about that. For Monk, they're buffing Master of Harmony and Con of Celestials. So as you mentioned earlier, they're buffing like the weaker hero tree for pretty much all the classes. Monk was playing Shadowpan on Brewmaster and Windwalker, so I doubt this is going to be enough to change that. Especially for Brewmaster, Shadowpan is like ridiculously better than Master of Harmony. Because it provides 10% DR baseline, basically, so I doubt that this is enough to pass it, but we will see. These are some pretty big damage buffs, so who knows. For Paladins, Holy Paladin randomly catching a stray healing nerf, which, while Presovoker exists, is ridiculous to me. Don't really understand what's going on there. Lightsmith caught some big buffs. They basically like almost undid the Lightsmith nerfs from beta, so that's kind of interesting. Now for the good stuff, Prot Pally, all damage increased by 6, which is awesome. Word of Glory healing increased by 20, another awesome change. Basically, I'm taking a talent right now that increases Word of Glory healing by 20 while I'm in Consecrate, so this will be another 20. And then, you know, in the 0.5 patch, we're getting another 20, so maybe Word of Glory will actually heal for, you know, some visible number after the 0.5 patch, which will be awesome. Light of the Titans now heals over 10 seconds instead of 15. I don't think this is enough to make this talent takeable in any scenario. What they need to do to make this talent playable is to make you able to have multiple instances of it. And they didn't do that, so this talent is still complete trash. Faith in the Light increased to 6, which is kind of interesting. I was already playing this talent a lot of the time, so I'll probably just play it. It'll still just be a little bit better. And now a bunch of changes to Lightsmith. So these are all just massive buffs to random talents in the Lightsmith tree. After some basic dummy testing, it appears to me that Lightsmith will be much better than Templar. So like Paladin damage is going up by 6, but then we're also swapping to Lightsmith, which got buffed. So I would say Paladin damage probably got increased somewhere between 10 and 15%. That's a very rough estimate. But most likely we will be playing Lightsmith starting Tuesday. And also that's kind of nice because in the 0.5 patch, there was a really nice change to the Lightsmith hero tree that gives you extremely short cooldown on your interrupts. So it's going to be super easy to solo kicks now on Paladin, which is nice. So yeah, Templar is probably dead, I would say, come Tuesday. We'll obviously have to do some more testing, but it's looking really good for Lightsmith. So this Paladin is basically getting 6% buff baseline, and then we're all swapping to Lightsmith, as I mentioned, so it's like roughly 10 to 15-ish percent. The Word of Glory healing is also kind of nice for Lightsmith because Lightsmith casts Word of Glory more often due to one of the hero talents that gives you more Shining Light procs. So that is nice too. For Rhett, we got a Templar buff. I'm not sure if it's enough to make you play Templar over the other one, Herald of the Sun. So we'll skip over that. Shadow looks like a pretty big buff, especially to Void Weaver. I'm not sure if this will be enough to make them quote-unquote meta. I think it'll just be like playable, which is great. That's where we want classes to be. For Rogue, I believe this is a buff to Deathstalker and another buff. So this is like 2 buffs to Assassination, I think, according to this. Especially to Single Target, which was Assassination's weakness. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit more Assassination Rogue near the top of the ladder. It already does a lot of damage. It's just like, you know, not as tanky as Frost Decay and probably not as high damage as Enhance when Enhance is played perfectly. Also missing Shaman utility, obviously, from Enhance. Outlaw caught some buffs. Especially this Precise Cuts buff means that Outlaw will be really good in like low target cleave, I think. I still don't see Outlaw being like the rogue spec of the patch. You might play it, I think, in a few dungeons. But you'll only play it if you're like capable of playing all three rogue specs. Then you'd be like, ooh, we're doing mists. I could play Outlaw finally. But you won't play Outlaw in like, I still don't think you play it in like Necrotic Wake or Dawnbreaker because Necrotic Wake has two big pulls and Dawnbreaker has too much travel time on mount. For sub, we have Black Powder increased by 35, which is kind of interesting because I think right now you want to play Trickster in Mythic Plus. I have not studied Rogue that much this patch, so don't take my word for it, but I believe Trickster is the best sub-rogue hero talent, and I don't think that'll change with the Black Powder increase, and I still think you'll be pushing Eviscerate and AoE. So yeah, this probably changes the number at which you push Eviscerate versus Black Powder. I think right now it's like 10, so this will definitely change that number, but not a massive change for sub, I don't think. Resto Shaman catches a light nerf here. Acid Rain reduced by 20. And the Earth Shield DR you get was 5, and now it's 3%. I don't think this is going to do much to shake up the healer meta. The top end, I'm pretty sure everyone's still just going to play Resto Shaman. Although I believe more people are probably going to start playing Disc Priest, not because of this, but because like their Disc Priests are finally getting geared up. And like Disc Priest is, and Paladin is getting buffed also, which is like a nice pair with Disc Priest. So I think more people will probably start playing Disc Priest, but not because of this. For Warlocks, I know nothing, not going to comment. For Warrior, Mountain Thane is getting some pretty big damage buffs as well as Colossus. And we are losing some Rage, but I think the Rage nerfs are extremely small. So like Lightning Strikes generates 3 instead of 5. Thunderblast generates 8 instead of 10. I'm pretty sure that's going to be like maybe, I'm not going to make an estimate, but it's a very, very low amount of Rage lost. And we're gaining some amount of damage. So I would say overall, this is probably actually a buff, in my opinion. So I don't think Prot Warrior is going to be changing that much. Basically, of the top tanks, I don't think any of them are changing that much, except Paladin is getting, you know, a really big damage buff, but I don't think that's enough to move it like into the top 3 or anything. Venus is getting buffed, but it's already a top 3 tank in my opinion, so that's not changing. We also have some random Fury buffs. Those will be nice because Fury, I think, got over nerfed by the raid. And that is it for the patch. So overview, basically I think Blood Decay won't change to Sand Lane in keys, maybe in raid for more damage. We'll see. DH got some pretty big baseline buffs, and I think the buffs are very, very good for Eldrachi, so I wouldn't be surprised to see more DHs trying out Eldrachi at the top end. I definitely will be trying some new builds, and I will continue to play Eldrachi as VDH. Paladin got roughly, it says 6% here, but we'll also be swapping to an extremely buffed Lightsmith. So I'd say it's roughly 10 to 15-ish percent increased damage. Again, the robots will calculate that math later, but that was my initial assessment. Brewmaster, I'm pretty sure will still play Shadowpan, and Warrior got some like. Thanks for watching.